The moment I saw my stolen design blazing across the cover of Vogue with his name beneath it, I felt something inside me shatter and rebuild simultaneously. There it was. My signature asymmetrical hemline. The hand-draped satin layering that I had spent 2 agonizing months perfecting, working until my fingers bled and my eyes strained in the dim light of my cramped studio. But the credit line beneath the photograph read in bold mocking letters. Designed by Luca Sarto, creative director of Atelier Sarto. My boss. My former lover. The man who had once whispered in my ear during our most intimate moments. You are more valuable behind the curtain, Elena. You do not have the name recognition yet. He was absolutely right about one thing that night. Back then, I did not have the name. But what he failed to recognize, what he catastrophically underestimated, was that I possessed something far more dangerous than fame. I had the fire. The kind of burning, consuming passion that could either create masterpieces or destroy empires. And in that moment, staring at my stolen soul displayed for the world to admire under someone else's signature, I decided it would do both. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, where my dreams turned into weapons and my heartbreak transformed into haute couture. I had been working under Luca Sarto for 5 torturous, brilliant years. 5 years of watching him bask in the glory of my midnight inspirations, my breakthrough concepts, my revolutionary techniques that pushed the boundaries of what fashion could achieve. He would stride into board meetings wearing his perfectly tailored suits, commanding rooms full of industry titans while I sat in the shadows, watching him present my ideas as if they had sprung fully formed from his own genius. The arrangement had seemed tolerable, even logical, in the beginning. I was young, hungry, desperate to learn from someone who had already established himself in the ruthless hierarchy of New York's fashion elite. I convinced myself that this was how the industry worked, that paying my dues meant sacrificing my identity for the promise of future recognition. Luca made it easy to believe these lies. He was charming in the way that dangerous men often are. With his salt and pepper hair that he wore just long enough to suggest artistic rebellion, and eyes that could shift from warm honey to ice-cold calculation, depending on what he needed from you in any given moment. You are my secret weapon, he would tell me during our late-night design sessions, his fingers tracing the lines of my sketches with an intimacy that made my skin burn. Together, we are unstoppable. But I was not his partner. I was his ghost. Every revolutionary silhouette that emerged from Atelier Sarto bore the invisible fingerprints of my sleepless nights. The critically acclaimed Midnight in Morocco collection that earned him a spot on the cover of Harper's Bazaar? I had conceived it during a fevered dream after watching old Hitchcock films and eating too much Thai food. The avant-garde wedding dress that made every bride in Manhattan weep with envy? I had sketched it on a napkin during my lunch break, inspired by the way light fell through the Venetian blinds in our shared workspace. But when the fashion world whispered about genius, they whispered Luca's name. The relationship between us was as toxic as it was intoxicating. We would fight like enemies and make love like we were trying to consume each other completely. He would criticize my techniques in front of our team, then pull me into his office to tell me how essential I was to his vision. The push and pull, the constant emotional whiplash, kept me dizzy and dependent. I should have recognized the pattern. I should have seen how he used my insecurities like puppet strings, keeping me close enough to exploit my talents, but far enough away to deny me credit. But love, even the poisonous kind, has a way of blinding us to our own destruction. The turning point came when my designs started generating the kind of attention that could not be ignored or suppressed. Fashion insiders began asking pointed questions about the sudden evolution in Luca's aesthetic. Bloggers started noting the dramatic shift in his design philosophy. Most dangerously, other fashion houses began reaching out to me directly, having somehow traced certain innovative techniques back to my portfolio. Instead of celebrating this recognition, instead of finally acknowledging my contributions, Luca panicked. He implemented what he called brand consolidation. Suddenly, I was no longer allowed in client meetings. My name was scrubbed from internal documents. When fashion journalists requested interviews about specific pieces, I was instructed to decline and redirect all inquiries to his publicity team. This is for the good of the brand, he explained during a tense confrontation in his corner office, the city skyline glittering behind him like a promise I would never be allowed to touch. People need to associate innovation with Atelier Sarto, not with individual contributors. It is about building something larger than ourselves. But what he really meant was building something larger than me, while keeping me small enough to control. The final, unforgivable betrayal came during the lead-up to the Met Gala season. I had been working on a deeply personal project, a collection I called Rebirth, inspired by my own journey of self-discovery and creative awakening. The centerpiece was a gown I had titled Venus Rising, a breathtaking creation that merged classical mythology with cutting-edge construction techniques. This was not just another commission or commercial design. This was my artistic statement, my declaration of independence, the piece that would announce my emergence as a force to be reckoned with in the fashion world. I had poured every ounce of my skill, my pain, my hope into its flowing lines and innovative structure. The gown featured a revolutionary corsetry technique that created the illusion of the wearer emerging from ocean foam. Just like Botticelli's Venus, the fabric seemed to move like water, shifting between silver and sea green depending on the angle of light. It was the kind of piece that fashion historians would write about for decades. I had planned to debut it as part of my own independent collection, my official announcement that I was ready to step out of Luca's shadow and claim my rightful place in the industry. But Luca had other plans. 3 weeks before the Met Gala, I walked into the studio to find him presenting my Venus Rising concept to a room full of fashion editors and potential clients. He stood beside my sketches, my fabric samples, my detailed construction notes, speaking passionately about his latest inspiration, and this breakthrough moment in his artistic evolution. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching him steal not just my design, but my soul. He was not simply taking credit for my work. He was claiming ownership of my most vulnerable creative expression, the piece that represented everything I had fought to become. When he noticed me standing there, our eyes met across the room. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his expression. Guilt perhaps, or maybe just annoyance at being caught. But he did not stop. He did not acknowledge me. He simply turned back to his audience and continued his presentation, erasing me from my own story in real time. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I quit. Not gracefully, not diplomatically, not with the kind of professional courtesy that might have preserved some possibility of future reconciliation. I quit with the fury of a woman who had finally recognized her own worth, who had finally understood that talent without recognition is just another form of slavery. I walked into his office the next morning, placed my resignation letter on his desk, and spoke the words that I had been practicing in my mirror for 5 years. You are a thief, Luca. You steal dreams and sell them as your own. But you cannot steal what I have not yet created. He looked up from his morning espresso with that infuriating smile that had once made my heart race. Elena, you are being dramatic. Let us discuss this like adults. There is nothing to discuss, I replied, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I am done being your ghost. As I walked toward the door, he called after me with the kind of casual cruelty that revealed his true nature. You will be back. You need me more than I need you. Without my name, without my connections, you are just another struggling designer in a city full of dreamers who never make it. I turned back to face him one last time, memorizing every detail of his arrogant expression, banking that image for the moment when I would prove him wrong. We shall see, I said quietly. And then I walked out of Atelier Sarto forever. The next 6 months were the most challenging and transformative of my life. I moved from my comfortable Manhattan apartment to a tiny studio in Brooklyn, trading marble countertops for a hot plate and million-dollar views for a window that looked out onto a fire escape. My new workspace was a converted basement that I rented from an elderly Italian woman named Mrs. Benedetto, who took pity on my situation and charged me half the market rate in exchange for occasionally helping her with her own sewing projects. The basement was everything that Atelier Sarto was not. Instead of gleaming industrial sewing machines, I worked with a vintage singer that Mrs. Benedetto's mother had brought from Sicily in 1952. Instead of teams of assistants and seamstresses, I had only my own hands and an unshakable determination to prove that talent could triumph over privilege. But I also had something that Luca did not expect, something that would ultimately become his downfall. I had allies in places he never thought to look. During my time at Atelier Sarto, I had encountered many of Luca's former lovers. He had a pattern, a predictable cycle of seduction and abandonment that left a trail of brilliant, accomplished women in his wake. These were not naive ingenues. They were actresses, writers, artists, entrepreneurs who had initially been drawn to his charm, but eventually recognized his fundamental inability to see women as anything more than accessories to his own success. One of these women was Vivienne DeMarco. Vivienne was everything that Luca claimed to value in a woman. Stunningly beautiful, internationally successful, independently wealthy, and utterly unimpressed by his attempts to diminish her accomplishments. She was an Academy Award-winning actress who had transitioned into producing, with a reputation for supporting emerging female artists and challenging industry power structures. Luca had pursued her relentlessly for months, finally winning her over with a combination of grand romantic gestures and promises of creative collaboration. For 6 months, they were the fashion world's golden couple, photographed at every premiere and gallery opening, their relationship dissected and celebrated in countless magazine profiles. Then, without warning or explanation, he ghosted her. Not gradually, not with the courtesy of a difficult conversation, but with the complete and sudden silence that narcissists deploy when they decide someone is no longer useful to them. Vivienne went from being his muse and companion to being completely erased from his life, discovering his abandonment when she saw photographs of him with another woman at a charity gala they had planned to attend together. The fashion press, always hungry for drama, had initially tried to position Vivienne and me as rivals. Luca's muse versus Luca's protégé. They called us, creating a narrative of competition between two women who had never actually met, but who shared the common experience of being diminished by the same man. What they did not know, what they could never have predicted, was that Vivienne had been quietly following my work for years. She had recognized my hand in Luca's designs long before I had found the courage to claim them. Her trained eye, sharpened by years of studying character and motivation for her film roles, had detected the shift in aesthetic sensibility that occurred whenever my influence was strongest. She had even saved some of my original sketches that had been leaked online by former Atelier Sarto employees who recognized the injustice of the situation. So when I received a direct message from her verified Instagram account 3 weeks after my dramatic exit from Luca's company, I initially assumed it was some kind of elaborate prank. "I have been waiting for you to finally leave him," the message read. "I want to talk. Are you free for coffee tomorrow?" We met at a small cafe in the village, far from the fashionable establishments where we might be recognized and photographed. Vivienne arrived wearing dark sunglasses and a simple black coat, but her presence was unmistakable. She moved with the kind of contained grace that comes from years of being watched, evaluated, and judged by strangers. "I know what he did to you," she said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from me. "I know because he did the same thing to me, just in a different context." She proceeded to tell me about their relationship, about how he had initially courted her by praising her intelligence and independence, then gradually began undermining her confidence with subtle criticisms and controlling behaviors. He had wanted to redesign her image, to make her more sophisticated and serious, which really meant making her more compliant with his vision of what she should be. "The difference between us," she continued, "is that you actually gave him something valuable. You gave him your talent, your creativity, your artistic soul. I only gave him my time and attention, which is bad enough, but nothing compared to what he stole from you." As we talked, I began to understand that Vivienne was not just offering sympathy or solidarity. She was offering something far more powerful, an opportunity for mutual revenge. "The Met Gala is in 3 months, she said, her eyes glittering with the kind of dangerous intelligence that had made her such a compelling actress. "I have been invited, obviously, and every major fashion house in New York has been begging to dress me. But I want something different. I want something that will make a statement." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "I want you to design my gown. I want it to be so beautiful, so innovative, so unmistakably brilliant that every person in that room will know they are looking at the work of a genius. And then I want to make sure they know exactly who that genius is." The proposal was audacious, risky, and absolutely perfect. The Met Gala was fashion's most important night. The event that could make or break careers. The stage where legends were born and pretenders were exposed. If I could create something extraordinary for Vivienne, something that captured the attention of every major fashion editor and industry insider in attendance, I could announce my emergence as an independent force in a way that could not be ignored or suppressed. But it also meant betting everything on a single night, a single dress, a single moment of recognition that might never come. Why would you do this for me? I asked, still struggling to believe that this opportunity was real. Vivienne smiled, and for the first time since we had sat down, she looked genuinely warm rather than strategically charming. Because talent like yours should not be hidden. Because women like us should not let men like him win. And because I have been looking for a way to make him pay for what he did. And this feels like poetic justice. We shook hands across the small cafe table, two women united by shared betrayal and a hunger for vindication. What do you want the dress to say? I asked. That I have risen from the ashes, she replied without hesitation. That we both have. The next 3 months were a blur of 18-hour workdays, countless design iterations, and the kind of creative intensity that bordered on possession. I threw myself into the project with every ounce of skill and passion I possessed, knowing that this single gown would either establish my reputation or confirm my irrelevance. The theme for that year's Met Gala was Gilded Age Glamour, which gave me the perfect framework for creating something that was both historically informed and radically contemporary. I decided to interpret the theme through the lens of transformation and rebirth, creating a piece that would literally and figuratively represent rising from destruction. The gown I designed for Vivienne was unlike anything that had ever walked the Met Gala red carpet. I called it Phoenix Rising, and it was constructed to create the illusion that she was emerging from flames made of fabric and light. The base of the dress was a fitted column of deep burgundy silk that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But as the eye traveled upward, the color gradually shifted through shades of gold and copper, finally exploding into brilliant orange and red at the shoulders and sleeves. The transition was so gradual, so expertly executed, that it created the optical illusion of fire moving up her body. But the real innovation was in the construction of the upper portion of the gown. I had developed a technique that allowed me to embed tiny LED lights within the fabric itself, so subtle that they were invisible during the day, but would create a genuine glow under the bright lights of the red carpet photography. The lights were programmed to pulse gently, like the rhythm of breathing or the flicker of flames. The silhouette was both classical and revolutionary. From a distance, it appeared to be a traditional evening gown with a dramatic train. But closer inspection revealed that what looked like a train was actually a series of detachable fabric panels that could be removed during the evening, transforming the look from red carpet drama to dance floor elegance. Every detail was perfect, from the hand-beaded bodice that created the texture of scales or feathers, to the innovative sleeve construction that allowed Vivienne's arms to move naturally while maintaining the illusion of wings. The entire piece required over 400 hours of hand sewing and employed techniques that I had developed specifically for this project. But beyond its technical innovations, the dress was an emotional masterpiece. It told the story of a woman who had been burned but refused to be destroyed, who had taken her pain and transformed it into power. Every time Vivienne moved, the gown seemed to come alive, the fabric catching light and shadow in ways that made her appear to be genuinely on fire. 3 days before the gala, we had our final fitting in my Brooklyn basement studio. Vivienne stood before the mirror in the completed gown, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The transformation was complete and breathtaking. "Elena," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "this is not just a dress. This is art." I felt tears prick my eyes as I made the final adjustments to the fit. This gown represented everything I had learned, everything I had suffered, everything I hoped to become. It was my declaration of independence sewn in silk and starlight. "There is one more thing," I told her as I stepped back to admire the completed look. "I want you to know that if this does not work, if the fashion world does not respond the way we hope, I will have no regrets. Creating this piece, working with you, reclaiming my voice, that is already a victory." Vivienne turned to face me, her eyes bright with determination. "Oh, it is going to work," she said with absolute certainty. Because talent like this cannot be ignored. And men like Luca cannot win. The night of the Met Gala arrived with all the fanfare and chaos that accompanies fashion's most important event. I had not been invited, of course, but Vivienne had arranged for me to be credentialed as part of her styling team, which meant I could watch the red carpet arrivals from a designated area and attend the after-party as her guest. I stood in the background wearing a simple black suit that I had made myself, my heart pounding as I watched Vivienne's car pull up to the entrance of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The crowd of photographers and fans erupted in anticipation, their voices creating a wall of sound that could be heard several blocks away. When Vivienne stepped out of the car, the reaction was immediate and electric. The Phoenix Rising gown moved exactly as I had designed it to, the fabric catching the flashes of hundreds of cameras and transforming them into something that looked like genuine fire. She seemed to glow from within, her presence commanding the attention of every person in the vicinity. But more than her beauty, more than the technical perfection of the gown, what struck me was her confidence. This was not a woman wearing a dress. This was a woman inhabiting a work of art, using it to tell her story and claim her power. As she posed for photographs, I could hear the murmurs of admiration and curiosity from the fashion editors and industry insiders around me. Who designed that gown? I have never seen anything like it. The construction is incredible. She looks like she is actually on fire. Vivienne worked the red carpet with the skill of a seasoned professional, but I could see that she was also genuinely enjoying herself. This was her moment of triumph, her public declaration that she could not be diminished or forgotten, that she had emerged from heartbreak stronger and more radiant than ever. When she reached the top of the museum steps, she paused and looked back, scanning the crowd until her eyes found mine. She smiled and gave me the smallest nod of acknowledgement, a secret communication between two women who had refused to let their stories be written by someone else. Inside the museum, the gala continued with its usual mixture of high fashion, celebrity spotting, and networking disguised as cultural appreciation. I moved through the crowd quietly, observing the reactions to Vivienne's gown, and listening to the conversations that would ultimately determine whether our gamble had paid off. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Fashion photographers were calling it the look of the night. Style bloggers were already posting analysis of the construction techniques. Several major fashion editors had approached Vivienne directly to ask about the designer, and I could see her deflecting their questions with promises to reveal more information later in the evening. But the most satisfying moment came when I spotted Luca across the room, standing with a group of fashion industry executives, and trying to maintain his usual confident demeanor. He looked older than I remembered, perhaps worn down by the pressure of constantly maintaining his facade of genius. He was wearing one of his signature perfectly tailored tuxedos, but somehow he seemed diminished, less impressive than the image I had carried in my memory. When he saw Vivienne enter the main gallery, his expression shifted through a rapid series of emotions. Surprise, recognition, calculation, and finally, something that looked like fear. He understood immediately that this was not a coincidence, that this was a deliberate message directed specifically at him. Throughout the evening, I watched him try to position himself near Vivienne, clearly hoping to be photographed with her, or to somehow associate himself with the attention her gown was generating. But she skillfully avoided him, using her knowledge of his habits and patterns to stay one step ahead of his attempts at proximity. The moment of ultimate vindication came during the after-party, when the formal dinner had ended and the evening had shifted into a more relaxed celebration. Vivienne had been asked to say a few words about her experience at the gala, and she took the microphone with the poise of someone who was accustomed to commanding attention. "I want to thank everyone for making this such a magical evening," she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the room. "But most importantly, I want to acknowledge the brilliant woman who created this gown, who took my vision of rebirth and transformation, and made it into something that exceeded my wildest dreams." The room fell silent, every conversation stopping as people turned to listen. Fashion is often presented as the vision of individual genius, usually male genius, but the reality is that our most beautiful creations emerge from collaboration, from the meeting of vision and skill, from the courage to trust each other with our most vulnerable artistic expressions. I felt my heart stop as I realized what she was about to do. The designer of this gown is not a household name yet, but she will be. She is a woman who has spent years creating masterpieces that others have taken credit for, who has finally found the courage to step out of the shadows and claim her rightful place in this industry. Vivian's eyes found mine across the room, and she smiled with the warmth of a true friend. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet the future of fashion. The woman who designed this gown and who represents everything that is innovative and exciting about the next generation of American designers. Please join me in celebrating Elena Vale. The spotlight found me in the crowd, and suddenly I was blinking in the bright light as hundreds of the most influential people in fashion turned to look at me. For a moment, I was paralyzed by the magnitude of the moment, by the realization that this was the recognition I had dreamed of for so many years. But then I saw Luca's face in the crowd, saw the shock and fury in his expression as he realized that his former ghost had just been introduced to the world as a force to be reckoned with. And in that moment, I found my courage. I walked through the crowd toward the front of the room, accepting congratulations and expressions of admiration from people who had never bothered to learn my name when I was working in Luca's shadow. When I reached Vivian, she handed me the microphone with a smile that said everything I needed to know about the success of our plan. Thank you, Vivian, for giving me the opportunity to create something beautiful for someone who understands the power of transformation, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. This gown represents more than fashion. It represents the idea that we can rise from any situation that tries to diminish us, that talent and determination will ultimately triumph over politics and ego. I paused, allowing my eyes to find Luca in the crowd one more time. To anyone who has ever had their work stolen, their credit taken, their voice silenced, this is proof that your moment will come. Truth has a way of revealing itself, and talent cannot be suppressed forever. The applause was thunderous, but more importantly, I could see the shift in how people were looking at me. I was no longer invisible, no longer someone who could be ignored or overlooked. I had claimed my place in the conversation, and there was no going back. The weeks following the Met Gala were a whirlwind of opportunities that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. My phone rang constantly with requests for interviews, collaborations, and commissions. Major fashion magazines wanted to feature my work. Celebrities were requesting custom pieces for upcoming events. Most significantly, I received invitations to show my own collection at several prestigious fashion weeks. But perhaps the most satisfying call came from Anna Wintour's office, requesting a meeting to discuss my vision for American fashion and my potential involvement in upcoming Vogue projects. The woman whose magazine had once featured my stolen designs under Luca's name now wanted to feature my authentic voice. Vivian became not just my muse but my business partner, investing in my new company and helping me establish the kind of infrastructure that would allow me to grow sustainably. She understood the importance of maintaining creative control while building commercial success, and her guidance proved invaluable as I navigated the complex world of fashion entrepreneurship. Within 6 months, I had moved from my Brooklyn basement to a proper atelier in Manhattan's garment district. I hired a small team of talented seamstresses and pattern makers, creating the kind of collaborative environment that I had always envisioned. Most importantly, every person who worked on my designs received proper credit and compensation for their contributions. The success was intoxicating, but what satisfied me most was the knowledge that I had reclaimed my narrative. I was no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had chosen to create in response to that theft. As for Luca, his career trajectory took a decidedly different path. The fashion world, once content to celebrate him as a visionary, began asking uncomfortable questions about the source of his inspiration. Former employees came forward with stories about his appropriation of their ideas. Fashion journalists started investigating the timeline of his most celebrated designs, discovering patterns that suggested a troubling reliance on uncredited collaborators. Within a year, major fashion houses stopped returning his calls. His atelier lost several high-profile clients. The man who had once commanded six-figure fees for custom pieces was reduced to designing accessories for lifestyle influencers, his name gradually fading from the conversations that shaped fashion's future. The last time I saw him was at a fashion industry charity event 2 years after the Met Gala. He approached me cautiously, perhaps hoping to find some path toward reconciliation, or at least peaceful coexistence. "Elena," he said, his voice lacking the confidence that had once been his trademark. "Congratulations on your success. You have built something impressive." I looked at him for a long moment, taking in the subtle signs of his diminished status. The slightly less expensive suit, the absence of the entourage that had once surrounded him, the way other attendees avoided making eye contact with him. "Thank you, Luca," I replied with genuine politeness. "I hope you have learned something from watching how this situation unfolded." He shifted uncomfortably, perhaps hoping for anger or bitterness that would allow him to cast himself as the victim of my ambition. "I always knew you were talented," he said. "Perhaps I could have handled things differently." "Perhaps," I agreed. "But then again, if you had handled things differently, I might never have found the courage to discover what I was truly capable of achieving on my own." I smiled at him with the kind of gracious confidence that comes from knowing you have won completely and definitively. Adversity, it turns out, can be an excellent teacher. As I walked away from that conversation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The theft of my designs had felt like a devastating ending, but it had actually been the beginning of my real story. Luca had taken my work, but in doing so he had forced me to discover reserves of strength and creativity that I might never have accessed otherwise. The fashion world loves a comeback story, but what I had achieved was something more than a comeback. I had completely rewritten the rules of engagement, proving that talent combined with determination could overcome any attempt at suppression. I had turned my pain into power, my betrayal into beauty, my invisibility into influence. Today, my designs are worn by A-list celebrities, featured in major museum exhibitions, and studied by fashion students around the world. I have won every major award in the industry, been featured on countless magazine covers, and established myself as one of the most influential voices in contemporary American fashion. But more than any external recognition, I have reclaimed something that no one can ever take from me again: the unshakable knowledge of my own worth. They say that revenge is a dish best served cold, but in my world, revenge is sewn in silk, walked up red carpets, and immortalized under flashing lights. It is the sweet satisfaction of watching justice unfold in real time, of seeing truth triumph over deception, of witnessing talent finally receive the recognition it has always deserved. And sometimes, if you are very lucky and very determined, you get to watch your former oppressor fade into irrelevance while you rise to claim the spotlight that was always meant to be yours. The fashion industry taught me that creativity without credit is just another form of slavery. But it also taught me that authentic talent, once revealed, cannot be denied or diminished. I am Elena Vale, and this is my story of rising from the ashes of betrayal to build an empire of authentic creative expression. Every stitch tells a story. Every design claims space. Every success proves that we are more powerful than anyone who tries to diminish us could ever imagine. If this story of creative justice and fashion industry triumph resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of overcoming adversity and claiming your power. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter, stories that remind us all that our talents and dreams deserve to be celebrated, not stolen. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of dreamers, creators, and believers in the power of authentic self-expression.